Everyone, my name is Piet van der Meer. I'm at the VUB, the Free University of Brussels, the Dutch-speaking one, and I'm very pleased to moderate today's webinar on open science in research projects, which we will do together with UNICA, our great help. Just as a brief introduction, I will share with you a PowerPoint or a few slides. Here we are. And I seek confirmation from Laura or Vicky that you can see it.
Yes, we can. It's fine.
Okay, let me put this on presentation mode. Good. The trigger for us for the VUB was for this webinar is a program that we have started, which is called the VUB Multidisciplinary Program on Sustainable Food and Biomass Systems. It's a long name. And first of the projects to be developed under that program is the Crop Improvement Compass. I will come back to that later, but first a little bit of background for the whole VUB multidisciplinary program, and that is a wave of developments we see worldwide. First of all, recognition that the supply of sufficient food and biomass in a sustainable manner and under the pressure of climate change and all kinds of other pressures requires massive changes in our agricultural production. And this in turn requires integrated strategies, and we see this developing all over the world. On the EU level, we see such strategies coming up one after the other. We had the European Green Deal, the Farm to Fork strategy, the biodiversity strategy, and a whole range of other strategies, all integrated strategies on making, among others, food production more sustainable. In this context, the VUB Research Council decided in December 2019 to establish a program to support the preparation and execution of multidisciplinary research and education projects for sustainable food and biomass systems. All of that is just to feed into this general trend of having further integrated strategies for sustainable food and biomass production. The assignment was in 2019 to develop this program in the course of 2020, last year, with the aim to be operational around now, early 2021. And the instructions were to make the following characteristics very clear in the program. First of all, of course, it should be multidisciplinary and integrative. So not multidisciplinary as in a way that disciplines are standing next to each other, but they're really that they are integrated into each other and strengthen the result. It should be collaborative and open. It should be evidence-based and results-oriented. So we're coming with very practical results, but whatever we do should be, as they call, data-driven and evidence-based. And of course, it should serve a very broad audience, from researchers to farmers to politicians to consumer organizations, etc. And I have here an asterisk at the word open, because that means for us that we will apply the concept of open science to the extent possible. And this is a concept that the European Commission has incorporated in a number of research budgets. And we are very pleased that we have a good collaboration with DG Research on this, on explaining what this means, open science, what it means in practice, how to do this in research projects. And we were equally pleased to have collaboration with UNICA, because they already organized a few very interesting seminars or webinars on this whole concept of open science. I will come back to the rest of the program a little bit later on, but let me first of all stop sharing this PowerPoint at this point and invite Luciano SASO from UNICA to welcome the participants on behalf of UNICA. Luciano, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much, Piet. It is a great pleasure for me to be here today. I'm Luciano SASO. I'm the president of UNICA. Just want to mention maybe a couple of words about UNICA for the participants who don't know this network. UNICA is a network at the moment of 55 universities based in 38 capital cities. The association is based in Brussels, and it deals with different issues related to internationalization of universities. And open science is a very important topic for UNICA. We actually addressed this topic in several events, even recently, and that is why it would be a pleasure in a few minutes to listen to Françoise van Doren, who is the coordinator of the Scholarly Communication Working Group of UNICA, which is one of the working groups more active on the topic of open science and open access. And so you will learn at that moment a little bit more about what UNICA is doing in this aspect. But let me anticipate that, again, for us is very important. It's very important to participate in European projects UNICA coordinated or was a participant in several European projects, many Erasmus Plus projects, but also Horizon 2020. And we're looking forward to being very active in the Horizon Europe scheme. And I would like also to thank very much René von SCHOMBERG, team leader of the Open Science Policy Coordination Development of the Directorate-General for Research and Innovation, for being with us today. We're looking forward to listening to him. And again, I want to thank Piet van der Meer, coordinator of the VUB Multidisciplinary Program on Sustainable Food and Biomass Systems of the VUB University, a UNICA member, because I think today we are going to look at open science in a concrete way, in a specific project that is multidisciplinary. And again, a multidisciplinary approach is also very important for UNICA, and I think is a different way and very useful and very concrete for us. Let me thank also Vicky Xonka and Laura Koloff from the UNICA Secretariat for organizing so well this webinar, and all of you participants for being with us today. And I wish you a very fruitful and very pleasant event.
Thank you very much, Luciano. And I very much join you in thanking Vicky and Laura for all their support. They've done a great job, especially since we had to organize this in pressure cooker time. With this, we will turn to the program. We will first have a presentation by René van SCHOMBERG from DG Research about what is open science. Then we will get some experience in working with open science from Françoise Verdoren. Next, I'll give a brief introduction to one of the projects that we are developing under the VUB program, and I'll give a little bit more information on the VUB program. But in the development of that project, we came across a number of very practical questions. How does open science work in conducting research? And we hope to discuss these questions and other questions related to open research in the course of this webinar. And with this, I'll invite René van SCHOMBERG to give us an introduction from the side of the DG Research on what is open science, what is it not, what does it mean in practice, what are the main elements, and so forth. René, with this, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Piet. Thank you for the kind invitation. So I will immediately share my screen. At least I will try to. Let me see if it's here. Yes. Can you give me a moment feedback, Piet, if everybody can see this now?
Well, whether everybody can, I don't know, but I can. It's perfect and clear. Thank you.
Okay, then I'll start right away. So I will present what I call practicing open science in two stages. One is a conceptual one. What is open science about? Why we want it actually, and what is the current policy situation or challenges around open science around this new policy concept. And then in the second phase, I will explain a little bit the most recent policies of ODZ, and also particularly that open science becomes, and that's really new for Horizon Europe, it will become part of the evaluation criterion of excellence. So as you probably all know, if you have done research for, if you have had a research grant of DG Research before, excellence is an important criterion evaluating your research proposals, and open science will now be for the first time also part of that. And I will say something on this because I think this is, of course, also for a practical sense very relevant. So let me start with the conceptual part. So what is actually the rationale? Now, I have defined open science in a recent publication of mine, which is actually in the broader context of responsible innovation as follows. That means sharing knowledge and data as early as possible in the research process in collaboration with all relevant knowledge actors. And you will find the similar definition in the ERA communication of the DG of the European Commission. So this has actually an implication in two ways. I mean, the rationale seems to be very simple, but then the implications are twofold. It means not just openness to knowledge sources, and probably most of you are knowledgeable about open access policies, and very often open science is associated by open access. But it actually entails much more, and the rationale of open science is actually not just not about publishing in open access, but there's a broader rationale, and I will come to that. So it means also openness to knowledge actors in the inclusions of these in your research. So this twofold element, you can actually picture this in, let's say, the research cycle of. So if you look to this diagram, the inner part of this diagram represents, let's say, usual representation of how research starts and ends and starts again. So you normally start with a research agenda, which enables you to do scientific discoveries, followed by analysis. Subsequently, you engage in the review and research assessment processes, and finally, you disseminate your gained knowledge in publications or with other means, and then you start the cycle again. Now, in the case of open science, actually all aspects of research is opened up. So it starts already from the research agenda, where you define your research topics or objectives. And in open science, you define them not just only as a researcher, but it can also include particular stakeholders, and especially in your field where you have the challenges of sustainability. This is quite obvious to do. And so this open science element comes at all stages of the process. It comes also in the review, which is increasingly done in an open way, where people can see who reviewed your research, and the review itself is also being published. In other words, the whole review process becomes much more transparent than it is. Research assessment as such will gain new qualities. On that I will also go into more detail. And actually maybe where open science is not the most effective up till now, let's say generally speaking, where open science has made its advancement is in the scientific discovery area. But even there, you see now, with the help of electronic notebooks, that the researchers share their data instantly over the world with their colleagues. And of course, COVID-19 and also the previous emerging public health issues were nice cases of how open science advances, because they're immediately researchers, but then actually not by directly by an external incentive or by research funding, but more or less from a moral perspective. So we have to share these data immediately prior to publishing in order to speed up the process. And we saw, for example, in the case of Ebola, that within 1 year you had an experimental vaccine, just because researchers took this initiative. Now, normally in a research process, of course, people don't do that, because if you share it too early, then you cannot publish about it anymore, as your research would not be counted as original. Now, this is a drama for the advancement of research. And of course, in the light of COVID-19, everybody realized that if you process as business as usual, you have to wait 10 years before you will get a vaccine. So hence research was immediately organized, actually globally, in a much more open way, not even as open as we want it to be, but still open enough to process data quickly, share knowledge globally, and work collectively on a vaccine. Now, so this is this research. So the rationale of open science obviously contributes to speeding up research, but it also, because of it opening up, it means, as I said, there are two components: openness to data and knowledge, which is very important for the advancement of science as such, but also openness to actors, and that means that you deliver on societal challenges, such as this, of course, sustainable development, all big societal challenges, and openness of research makes the responsiveness of research towards these challenges greater. So sharing knowledge and data as early as possible with all knowledge actors, that is the rationale of open science. And as I said, with COVID was a nice case. It has been a showcase for open science. But the question is, of course, why not make it to all societal challenges obligatory? Because if you use public funds, why people would need to pay twice for vaccine if you have funded, and in this case, for instance, in COVID, we have spent actually billions. Actually, we have subsidized multinationals to open up their resources and to work on a vaccine, which they would actually otherwise not do, because it would not bring them enough private gain, because these things are not on their radar screen. They prefer to occupy themselves with a much narrower health agenda. This is the reality of nowadays. So open science certainly contributes to a transformation of the research process. It makes eventually open science more efficient, because we share also resources. We don't duplicate resources. We are aware what other researchers are doing. We are not doing climate change research in the Netherlands and in Germany at the same time on the same subject matter. We make science more reliable, because the more you share your research with others, the more it's verified. Of course, with the data, 90% of second trial clinical trials fail because data have been kept too close, of course, for competitive reasons. But the effect is that the research is in those close contexts not so reliable as it should be and can be. Now, the question is, why not apply open science to all SDGs? And with Horizon Europe, which for 50% of its funding, so let's say roughly 50 billion at least, relates to SDGs or mission-oriented research. And open science will actually become enabler across the program, but on that later more. So, but let's now go to one practical element in already. If we say, well, if you want to practice open science as a researcher, and especially as a young researcher, you will face most likely a career dilemma. Because if you, let's say, imagine you have great research results and none in the scientific community is aware of it, and you ask the researcher, are you going to share this research? It's good for science, isn't it? And then the researcher would say, yes, it's a great idea. Of course, it would help science a lot. But the subsequent question is, are you going to do it? And then the answer is, of course, no, because it harms your career. You want to publish in a good journal, and you don't want others to take your data and run away with it. So in fact, practicing open science can damage your career quite concretely. And this is a challenge of course, for policy to change the rewards and incentive system, that we will not have this dilemma anymore. This is something I have been working on the last 5 years. We have actually set up a stakeholder forum on open science policy to specifically work on the rewards and incentive system. And in some countries, some changes are happening. I will come now later in that to more detail, but let's contrast the two systems which we have currently in place. If you practice closed science, it's all about individual prestige, actually, or most often it is. It's about publishing in the major scientific career element is your publication in a good journal. Now, the focus and motivation of science is very often on working on scientific frontiers, very logical. This motivates scientists, possibly also new and sexual results. Now, this actually means that you have to have a lot, as a researcher, a lot of endurance and good luck. For example, Nature, one of the, arguably one of the most well-known and important journals in the biosciences, only 7% of the submissions are actually published, which means that the other 93% have to look for other sources to publish it. And this also is a time delay. And again, it puts a brake on the advancement of science and sharing of data. For citations, it can actually be disappointing because it's a long process before you will actually manage to publish in such journals. So maybe you are motivated as a researcher to go to Princeton, and this is why you all do this. Now let's look to when you want to practice open science. When it comes there, working on open science meets another attitude to research and the way how you relate to your colleagues. It makes much more sense, and very often, especially for the societal challenges work, it's more important to establish a network, communicate and collaborate with the researchers on an issue in missions. And one has to think about it that nowadays in modern science, the quality of science is not so much determined by the intellectual superiority of one individual scientist who managed to publish in Nature. It's much more the effectiveness and the excellence of a very good network and a very good collaboration. And maybe even in most recent Nobel Prize winners, which actually stand for the classical concept of individual prestige, are of course only possible by enormous collaborations in research. The people who confirmed Einstein's gravitational waves theory published in an article which was co-authored with 1,000 authors. So there you go. Of course, the classical open science project of the past, the Human Genome Project in the 90s, was of course an enormous international collaborative project. So the motivation here is much more on societal impact, contribution, and societal desirable outcomes, so as the SDGs. So that means sharing and publishing in open access, or what I call Facebook for scientists, such as Senado, etc., where you can share your data, or by other means. It's just an example. You will see a much swifter and higher citation rate. It's actually enormous what is currently going on in these fora. It's really, you know, the high impact journals of Nature really becomes bleak when it comes to citations rate and sharing. Now, in the end, you will actually discover that it's actually not so bad to do it also in terms of mobility if you want to go to Princeton, because you will see that it will also engage in these networks increasingly. So open science is also a necessity, and sometimes it's not something which is imposed on researchers. I mean, opposing something on researchers is not a good idea anyway, but it's very often data intensive driven, and this leads to a necessity of collaboration by any means. So that means that we actually, with open science, move towards what we call a new new modus operandi for science. So the current system, which I presented already to some extent in the previous slides, is of course driven by self-excellence as a self-referential criterion, and unfortunately underpinned by a system of research metrics which is predominantly quantitative in nature, and even the high impact journal factor is still determining very often decisions of researchers what to do. And although everybody intellectually knows that with this quantitative use of research metrics, you actually don't measure, of course, the quality and productivity of researchers. You measure something else. And with open science, we changed to another rationale. I will be a little bit short here. So collaboration is here essential. Collaboration and sharing of the research. And that means actually also that if you want to assess researchers, then you will not just assess them on what they produce in terms of publications, but how their behavior is. So research behavior becomes an essential element in research assessment in the open science context. So the research behavior, such as collaboration and knowledge sharing. And your success and of research is very much more determined, not so much by your individual achievements as a publishing individual, but in what sense you contributed to a mission. So the changing of the reward incentive system has been embraced by 25 stakeholders with the Open Science Policy Platform, which we set up in 2016, which finalized its report in 2020. And they embraced, in fact, a whole new academic career structure that would reward a broad range of outputs. So not just publications, because there are, of course, other outputs also possible. Not just data sets then, but maybe also cell lines or other products which actually can be opened up and accessible in digital systems. So they have a vision for going towards a shared research knowledge system by 2030. They want to start up an open registry with pilots where people can learn from each other, especially also on the metrics where I was referring to, and the rewards and assessment system as such. In some countries like the Netherlands, they have taken the radical conclusion: in order to acknowledge open science, we have to do away with all the quantitative stuff. So bibliometrics is not part of the official research evaluation protocol anymore. Open science and research collaboration and these type of elements have become part of the new way of assessing research in the Netherlands. So you see that some countries, and they also include countries like Finland, and initiatives by individual universities, for example, who have moved in that direction. So I think we are at the beginning of a wave where the system will change. So this is these are the recommendations of the Open Science Policy Platform. I skipped that because this is too much detail for this at the moment. And let me then come to the European policies, which you are probably particularly interested in. And to give you a very short overview of from where we came from and where we are now, is that the framework program 7 in 2008 started with a pilot only for open access publications. And with the current program Horizon 2020, which ended last year, we have open access already mandatory. Probably you, of course, are aware of it. And since 2017, we stepped it up with mandatory open data and making data management plans also the default option for your proposals. Now, with Horizon Europe, so the current new framework program, of course, open access remains mandatory as it was, but we also now require data management plans in line with FAIR, so making data fair means making them findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And open data is, of course, also the default options. There are, as with open access, always exceptions when it comes to to issues of data sensitiveness in terms of personal data or on competition means, but the default options will be as stated here. Now, so we have now extensive articles on open science in the new framework program. I will highlight some things which are new and need some attention. First of all, it's the promotion of open science practices, which is now in Article 10 of the regulation. On that I will go more in detail because this will be the part on which research proposals to be successful in the framework program will be evaluated. So, but keep this for a moment in your mind that these open science practices, it's only one sentence, but they will be crucial. Of course, the costs also for data management and making data management, making data fair are all eligible for reimbursement. There may be additional obligations under the work program, so not under the framework program as such, but under specific work programs, because open science varies very much in what type of scientific discipline you actually operate. The high energy physicists, they always had practice at CERN. Open science is 30 or 40 years. For them, this is all not new. Of course, for the biosciences, it's a different story. Okay, so I think this is really new under Horizon Europe. So, so what I'm now going to present is not yet, I think, formally published as such, but it's based on a proposal of DG Research which has been agreed with member states, and soon this will be, let's say, completely formally announced under the new rules of the framework program. So, and this is about the promotion of open science practices. And let me then explain what they can include. So, of course, in my explanation on the rationale of doing open science, the early and open sharing of research is already highlighted. So this can include pre-registration of reports, use of preprints, for example, publishing preprints, of course. It also relates to research output management, so not just publications, but for example, also measures to ensure reproducibility of research outputs. That is just an example. Of course, providing open access of your research results. Well, open access to publication was already mandatory, but it's broader now the scope. It does not, open access is not only relating now to publications, but also to data and software, or maybe even algorithms and workflows. Participation in open peer review. And I think this is also really new, involving, although a lot of researchers already did this and practices this under previous framework programs. But now it's part of the evaluation program that if you involve relevant knowledge actors, including citizens, civil society, and end users, for the co-creation of research and innovation agendas, then this will be taken into account. So how does this now operate? Because you may now actually question, do we all have to do this? So the answer is no, but you can do it. And if you do it, then you have a much higher chance of getting funded. So the evaluation works now as such. So the normal obviously it stays, the excellence criteria remains as this. You will be evaluated on the basis of how far your research goes beyond the state of the art, the normal excellence criteria. But in addition, in alignment with the definition of open science as an approach to the scientific process, which then would be based on open and cooperative work, it means that proposers will make a description how they will implement open science practices beyond what is mandated. So you make in your proposal a description what type of open science practices are implemented as an integral part of the proposed methodology. So this becomes very essential. The proposal, I think it will be a one-pager or what is needed, which you would need to produce, and which will be evaluated. So evaluators, they will assess what the quality and appropriateness of these open science practices are, and the inclusion, of course, also of the other knowledge actors, and how research data management is proposed. So it becomes part of an assessment. Although the inclusions of all these open science practices will not be mandatory as such, but it's part of your evaluation. So if you do it, it's a strong incentive to practice open science. It makes your important criteria, of course, a higher score. Now, so there's an explicit expectation also that proposals include actually reference to already articles you have published before in open access or data sets or software. So if you have previously practiced open science, also this is an advantage. I can go too fast. So finally, research data, as I said, the data management plan will be mandatory, but it's sort of broader research data output management in line with FAIR. So the making things findable, accessible, interoperable, and reproducible, your data becomes important. It's not an absolute requirement because it can be technically still very difficult to do. But you have to show what type of efforts you have made. And in any case, if you hire, for example, a data specialist to do these things for you, then it will be part of your reimbursement scheme. Now, just to end my story with COVID, where I also started with, we have also established actually it's launched in 2019, the so-called European Open Science Cloud, which actually makes it possible for researchers to share, store, and reuse data across member states and across scientific disciplines. This will progressively unfold. In the light of COVID, we have started with a COVID-19 data portal where researchers could do this already specifically for COVID-19. Of course, again, with the rationale to speed up the research process. Of course, open science advances science much more quicker than any other form of closed science. So this has been, of course, a major success. Also, as you know, it substantially contributed to the outcomes. So to conclude, in the so-called communication on the European research area of last year, there are 14 actions. There are some actions referred to open science. One is that we will launch a platform for peer-reviewed open access publishing. Actually, it's already launched. It's called European Research Europe. That means that all beneficiaries from the framework program can publish there in open access, also their preprints, free of cost. So that will be a sort of alternative to existing publishing systems. It's not mandatory to make use of it, but it's for free. And then, so there will be a broader action also on promotion of equality and diversity in research, but this would also relate to the inclusiveness of research. So again, this is the inclusion of knowledge actors in your research process. Finally, there will be a lot of emphasis in area on citizen engagement in research, also in the framework program with the research missions. You probably heard about the 6 missions which we explicitly fund as being important for societal challenges, among other also the healthy soil initiative, which relates to your business of agriculture. The inclusion of citizens will become important and quite massive in comparison with our previous work. So to finally end my talk, I would say coming soon to your theater is that you have to practice open science or simply don't receive public funding. You have seen an enormous step up in the process, and I look forward to your comments.
Thank you very much, René. And first of all, my compliments for a very clear presentation and for being exactly on time. We are exactly up to the next point of the presentations. What I'm going to do, since we have no time left at the moment, is to keep any questions and comments to the end, after you've heard all the presentations. And as I said, I will